Hey everybody, Pritch here, and you're here to learn how to play a Dragonhunter, which is my favorite open world class in Guild Wars 2, so I'm very excited to say, let's get into it. Alright, we're going to start out with our gear, as always. Everything that you own is going to be Berserker stats, alright? Helmet, all your armor pieces, all your weapons, all your accessories for your weapons, and we're going to segment this, by the way, in terms of 3 different ways to play Dragonhunter. The first way, my personal favorite for open world, will be with a Scepter. The second way will be with a sword. And the third and final way that I'll get to at the end of the video is through running a different trait line called Virtues. And we'll get into all that, and these will be different segments. But for now, for the beginning, I will be teaching you how to play an open world Dragonhunter through the Snowcrows build with a Scepter and a Focus and a Greatsword. Alright, so weapons, Greatsword, Scepter, Focus, all Berserker stats. The rune that you'll be running is Rune of the Scholar. This is going to give you increased power and increased crit damage. Ferocity is crit damage. And then we're also going to receive a 5% increased damage whenever we are above 90% health. Alright, and then our sigils are going to be Force and Impact on the Greatsword, and then again, Force and Impact on the Scepter and Focus. As well for the sword, it will also be the same sigils as well. So, we've done that. Let's get into our specs now. This is the fun part. I'm going to be spending a decent amount of time discussing the specs for this because it's really important to learn as a Dragonhunter what makes you do so much damage. There's a lot of things that are augmenting your increased damage, and I want you to learn and understand these things before I try to explain to you what buttons to press in what order so that you know why we do things in a certain way. Alright? So, starting out with Zeal. We're going to be going 2, 2, 3, and to just go through real fast, as soon as we get hit below 75% health, it will automatically cast a Symbol of Wrath. Don't worry about it too much, just know these big 2 things. 1, it's a symbol, and 2, it gives you retaliation. These are going to come in later, I promise. Alright? Fiery Wrath, you gain increased damage when you are attacking a burning foe. So as long as the foe has a burn tick on him, you will do increased damage by 7%. Now remember, as a Guardian, every couple auto attacks that you do will automatically give the foe a burn tick. Alright, so just by being a Guardian, you are already going to be accomplishing this, okay? Next, we're going to have Symbolic Exposure. Symbols inflict vulnerability. Anytime you cast a symbol, the symbol will give vulnerability. Anytime you attack a foe with vulnerability, you are doing increased damage. So now anytime the foe has burning and anytime the foe has vulnerability, you are doing increased damage to them. Which vulnerability, by the way, in and of itself is a debuff that causes the enemy to take more damage. So you're basically like doing double effects of doing more damage essentially. Alright, next you're taking Zealous Blade, which just gives your Greatsword more power and reduced recharge. Finally, we have Symbolic Power, which is your symbols just do more damage, and your Virtue Skill 1 passive charges twice as fast. Finally, we have Symbolic Avenger, which is another thing affecting your symbols. Symbols will give you stacks of Symbolic Avenger. Symbolic Avenger gives you a 2% damage increase, which can stack up to 5 times. 2 times 5 equals a 10% damage increase. So, just from this trait line alone, you do more damage to enemies that are burning, you do more enemies to damage that are standing on your symbols, and you do more damage to enemies that have vulnerability. Okay? And that is just through Zeal alone. Now let's go into Radiance. Under Radiance, it's going to be very easy. 3, 3, 3. Alright. Under Radiance, the things that we care about, this entire trait line revolves around you having the buff Retaliation. Now, the buff Retaliation basically reflects incoming damage back at the source. That's not in and of itself a very damaging thing, but through this trait line, we are going to make Retaliation give us a lot more extra damage. So, the first thing to notice is Healer's Retribution. Anytime that I press my heal skill, which for example would be this number 6 right here, I will gain Retaliation. So, I press it, and Retaliation shows up right here for about 8 seconds, alright? This is what Retaliation is, just a buff, alright? And anytime I press my heal skill, I get it. Now, Renewed Justice. Anytime I use my F1, this is the skill that resets the F1 when I kill the foe. Don't worry about that too much. Here's the big one. Retribution. Retaliation grants you increased damage, 10%. So, anytime I have the buff Retaliation on me, I get a 10% DPS boost. So, the Retaliation in and of itself is not giving me, bonus damage, but through this trait line, now it is. Alright? Next we have Radiant Power. This means that anytime I am attacking a burning foe, which remember, since we're Guardians, we're going to apply burn stacks just passively, just through hitting. Anytime I'm attacking a burning foe, I gain a 10% increased crit chance. On top of that, I gain Ferocity, which is crit damage. So, when I attack a burning foe, I gain a flat DPS boost of 7%. Now I gain a flat crit chance boost of 10%. On top of that, I gain Ferocity, which means my crit damage goes up, just by attacking a burning foe. Finally, we have the big one, Righteous Instincts. Now, if you read this, when we have Retaliation, we gain 25% crit chance. That is a lot of crit chance. 25% is huge, which basically means if you're looking at Righteous Instinct, Radiant Power, on top of the buff Fury, which, by the way, the buff Fury gives a 20% crit chance increase. So, just in and of itself, we have a 25% increase from Righteous Instincts. We have a 10% increase on Burning Foes, so now we're at 35%. And then with Fury, with the buff Fury, which a heal brand can provide to you, basically 100% uptime, alright, you now have an extra 55% crit chance. Just from your specs, you have an extra 55% crit chance. Just to give you an idea here, when you have your base Berserker gear all ascended right now, I currently am sitting at a base of 52% crit chance. And just to show you how this works, alright, I'm going to get into this later, I promise, but just know that Symbol of Wrath gives me Retaliation. So when I press this button, I'm going to gain Retaliation. Watch what happens to that 52%. Now I'm at 77% because I just went up 25%. Now, let's reset that real fast, and let's put on a skill that gives me Fury. If you see right here, Feel My Wrath, this ability right here gives me 10 seconds of Fury, which is 20% crit chance. If I have the buff Fury and I have the buff Retaliation on me, watch my crit chance. I am at 97% crit chance with 2 buffs and all Berserker gear, and that's it. Incredibly powerful, incredibly strong, amazing, 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 okay? Whew, that's a lot of talking. All right, finally, we have the Dragonhunter skill line here. All right, and for the Dragonhunter, we're going to be running 1, 2, 3, going a nice little, going down the line, basically. For 1, it just gains a reduced recharge on our traps. It also slows enemies. Don't worry too much about that. And then don't worry too much about Defender's Dogma. Basically, it reduces the cooldown of Spear of Justice. Zealot's Aggression. This gives us a flat 10% bonus damage whenever the enemy is crippled. You will be doing a lot of cripples through using your Sword of Justice. Your Sword of Justice does 3 seconds of cripple, which stacks. Ooh, excuse me. On top of that, your F1, once cast and into somebody, will also cripple the enemy for 1.5 seconds. Basically, the enemy is going to be crippled quite a bit, especially if you're rotating through your Swords of Justice quite a lot, which gives you an increased DPS boost again. If you're not noticing, this whole kit revolves around having just a bunch of DPS, depending on, like, a multitude of different factors, right? Okay. Deal bonus damage based on distance. That's not really going to matter too much, but basically just understand you're getting a little bit of a DPS bonus. You're going to have basically a 5% DPS bonus or so. Okay, Big Game Hunter, finally, is a 15% DPS boost. 15% DPS boost anytime your F1 is tethered, as in it's stuck in some opponent. And we're going to get into that. We're going to get into skills and abilities. Just understand you're getting a flat 15% DPS boost every time that your F1 is stuck into someone. So, to recap all this craziness and all this madness, alright? When you are attacking a burning foe, you have increased DPS, increased crit chance, increased crit damage. When a foe is standing in your symbols, you have an increased DPS. When you when your foe has the debuff of vulnerability or cripple, both of those give you a flat DPS boost. When you have retaliation, you have an increased crit chance and increased crit damage. So all this stuff combined is how we're going to try and weave all our buffs and everything into our big hitting abilities. We have a lot of things that augment our DPS, and we want to be using our biggest hitting abilities while we are at the most augmented of our DPS. Okay? So, let's get into our skills and abilities. Remember, this is going to be the very first way of doing Dragonhunter. It's going to be with a Scepter focus greatsword. So right now I currently have my greatsword equipped. This is what our Scepter focus looks like. No matter what build you're trying to run, you're always going to be running these five abilities right here. So let's go ahead and just go through our abilities one at a time. We'll do the auto attacks last, okay? So first ability we have here is Whirling Wrath. You spin in a circle like a frickin' Beyblade, and you look sexy doing it, all right? It's got a 6-second cooldown, and you just spin around. You do a lot of damage, a lot of damage, and it also shoots out projectiles. I'm going to talk about how these projectiles work and how to min-max the damage on this ability later, I promise. But just know that it looks like a Beyblade, and you look frickin' sweet. Okay, your second ability, Leap of Faith. You do a 600-unit leap in the air, and if you hit your target, you do a bunch of damage, and you also inflict blinding. This is really awesome for the open world as a gap closer, as well if you know the opponent is about to do some big hitting attack, then you want to throw this out to blind them. All right. Symbol of Wrath. Remember, this is a symbol. On top of it being a symbol, this also gives you retaliation when you stand in it. So, I press it. This creates a symbol on the ground, and I am continuously getting retaliation for however long I'm standing in that symbol. So, this is a huge damage augmenting ability for us, remember? We want enemies standing under our symbols, we get more damage. We want retaliation, we get more damage. This ability gives us both of those things, okay? So this is a really strong ability for us. Finally, we have Binding Blades. Now, Binding Blades shoots out a max number of 5 blades as long as there's enough people within the 600 range of its cast. You spin around and you throw out these blades that attach to enemies, okay? If I am close enough to an enemy and it actually attaches, this will tick to do a little bit of damage over 10 seconds. So if I press it once, I've thrown and I've hit him. Now watch. It is ticking damage this entire time. That's 794. I can recast this ability, and it will pull the enemies that were attached to me. Now, this is a bigger enemy, and it won't be affected by CC abilities, but that is also a form of CC, and we'll get into that later when we talk about our CC abilities, but know that in the open world, this is a really great ability to just pull all the mobs in towards you. You cast it once, you spin around in a circle, it throws out the blades, everything attached with the blades, you can then pull to pull into you. If you are just using it for DPS, do not recast pull. If you just want it for DPS, just leave the sword stuck in him for 10 seconds, and it'll periodically tick away damage. It's a small DPS boost. It's not a lot, but it does a little bit over time. Alrighty, let's talk about our healing ability, Litany of Wrath. And remember, when we press our heal ability, we are giving ourselves retaliation. So, the moment I press it, boom, I have retaliation now. It's also going to give a little bit of might, but we're going to get might from other sources, typically our supports as well. So, we gain might, we gain retaliation. Retaliation was the big one. What this ability does is it gives us 6 seconds of basically lifesteal. Think of it like lifesteal. 33% of the damage dealt is returned to me as healing. Since I burst so stinking hard, typically as soon as you activate this and then you do a little bit of a combo, you're back to full health in like 1 second. It's a really nice healing ability for a very hard-hitting class. All right. Now let's talk about Procession of Blades. This is a trap that you get through being a Dragonhunter. As soon as you press it, there's a little bit of a cast time, and it lays a trap on the ground. All right? Nothing happens, and this trap doesn't activate until an enemy comes in this little white circle right here. What can be really nice is you cast your trap and then you pull enemies into your trap. All right, think of that for the open world, but for DPS purposes, it's a very big hitting ability. So let's say I come right here and I drop Procession. Let's walk away for a sec. It spins and does a bunch of ticks of damage right there. All right, 10 times 4k damage. On top of that, when the trap triggers, you gain Fury. All right, remember, Fury is that increased crit chance, right? So as soon as I come up here and I drop Procession and then I run away, I now have Fury. So when I drop Procession, it does a lot of damage and it gives me Fury. All right, next let's talk about our Sword of Justice. This is a very heavy hitting ability that is also providing vulnerability and cripple, which remember, when we attack enemies that have vulnerability and cripple, we do increased damage. So this ability is huge. We are weaving this in constantly, and it is giving the enemy the debuffs that we really, really want them to have. All right? So, does a good amount of damage. You press it once, and then you have to press it again, and it summons a sword that spins around in a circle and goes yippee-ki-yay. And when you put it on an enemy, it does actually a really good amount of damage on top of inflicting debuffs. All right? And it's the debuffs that you really want and really need. Next, let's talk about our Bane Signet. Bane Signet gives us passive power. So if you'll notice right here, my power is currently increased. Oh, I'm still in combat with it. Okay. My power is currently green, which means it's being augmented and increased right now. Let's get out of combat by destroying this golem. Remove golem, respawn previous golem, boom. Okay. We should be out of combat and we can switch this skill to literally any other skill and ability. So, my power right now is 2,766. As soon as I put Bane Signet on, that jumps up to 2,946. It jumps up because Bane Signet passively gives me power. All right? This is an ability that we never use just doing our DPS. This is never going to be part of our rotation. But if you read it, it does 3 seconds of a knockdown when activated. When you are fighting a champion or a boss that has a CC bar, a crowd control bar, you need to press Bane Signet because Bane Signet does a lot of break bar damage. It does a really good chunk. So, save this ability. Only use it when you need to break a CC bar. Otherwise, you're never going to touch Bane Signet and you're just going to use it for its passive effect. All right? Finally, let's talk about our elite skill, Dragon's Maw. By the way, I always call this the ulti. It's just a habit, all right? I know it's an elite skill, but I always think of it as an ulti. So if I say ulti, just know that I'm talking about Dragon's Maw right here. Dragon's Maw is the same idea as Procession of Blades. I press it, it drops a trap on the ground with a little white circle, and it won't activate and it won't trigger unless an enemy comes into this circle. So, in and of itself, Dragon's Maw doesn't do a ton for you. In and of itself, it does not do a lot of damage. It pulls all enemies into the middle, which does a little bit of break bar damage, and again, we'll get into that and when we do the break bar stuff. But the huge thing that this does is it gives us 300 extra power when activated, okay? So, just to show you guys, if I come over here and I press Dragon's Maw, that did not do a ton of damage, right? Like that's not a huge ability right there. My numbers didn't go wow, right? But let's watch our DPS number right here, our power number. Watch this shoot up in the air when I activate it. Boom. Now we're at 3246. We just gained 300 power for 10 seconds, all right? That is why we use this ability. We use it so that we can passively gain 300 power. All right. That is all of our main abilities. That is all of our greatsword abilities. Let's talk about our Scepter focus abilities. Scepter 2 is a symbol, remember? So exact same idea. Oh my gosh, I'm in combat again, so now it's going to make me reset. All right. Let's hop over here, remove, respawn, and we're not in combat anymore. There we go. Good. So, remember, Greatsword 2 is a symbol. Drops a symbol, gives us retaliation. Symbol of punishment is, you guessed it, also a symbol. So, you drop it on the ground, and it creates a symbol. Whenever enemies are standing in the symbol, it will give you stacks of Symbolic Avenger. And I will show you actually, because I forgot to show you earlier on this. I dropped the symbol. Now wait, you see right here, Symbolic Avenger is proccing up to 5 ticks. Symbolic Avenger is the ability, or is the DPS increase from when enemies stand on your symbols. Alright? If I was to stop putting symbols down, eventually this will start ticking away, and it won't be at 5 stacks, it'll go to 4 stacks, then 3 stacks, then 2 stacks, and eventually it goes away. This is why we want symbols on the enemies basically at all times, so that we get that DPS boost, that DPS increase. Alright, so Scepter 2 is a symbol. It does a good amount of damage. There we go. I'm out of combat. You press it once, and then you activate it again to drop a symbol. Okay. Chain of Light is an immobilization and also inflicts vulnerability. Really, you're only going to be using this to do a little bit of CC damage. It roots the enemy for 5 seconds, which is very nice in some fights. For example, when you are doing the raid boss Samurog, and you need to push the ad underneath Samurog, you can then use this ability to root him there for 5 seconds. It's very handy. The next ability is Ray of Judgment. This will do a bunch of, think of it like tick damage over time, if you will, right? So if I come over here to the kitty golem, and I press this, oh, he is now ticking away damage over time because I put Ray of Judgment on him. Alright? It does a decent amount of damage. I'm going to do it again, and then we're going to weapon swap so we're not hitting. And you see it ticking damage over time. Alright? It's a pretty powerful ability, especially when you have all the augments and DPS boost going on in your kit. It's not amazing, but it's nice. Okay. Finally, we have Shield of Wrath. Shield of Wrath gives you a bunch of little shields. Look at all those, alright? When you have this active, you have a bunch of Aegis on you, essentially. Think of it like a bunch of little Aegises. If I was to get hit with 5 to 7 abilities right here, I wouldn't take, really, I shouldn't say 5 to 7. If I got hit by 5 different abilities right there, I wouldn't get hit by any of them. The shield would absorb it. But it can also be used offensively. So, let's say, oh my gosh, this is going to be so frustrating. Woo! Come over to the golem, remove, respawn, and go. Okay, so let's say I'm coming over here, and I activate Shield of Wrath. As soon as this pops, it does damage. Boom. 4,500 right there. This ability, when it pops, if you didn't use all of the, think of it like Aegis procs essentially, it will explode and do damage to all the enemies around you. So this can also be a little bit of a DPS boost. Alright, we have talked about all our Scepter abilities, all of our Greatsword abilities. We've talked about all of our 6 through 0 or 6 through 10, however you want to describe it. Finally, let's talk about our F1, F2, and F3. So I'm going to go in reverse order because as soon as I do the F1 stuff, it's going to start proccing the actual fight, and I don't really want to do that just yet. So F3, Shield of Courage, you're passively going to gain an Aegis just by being a Guardian. You're always going to. This particular Aegis is apparently going to last 1 month, 2 weeks, and 5 days. So it's going to last for a while. Which, anytime you start a fight as a Guardian, you're always starting with an Aegis. Alright, whenever you press Shield of Courage, it provides you with this nice little blocking shield that's directional. Alright, every time I use it, it's a directional block in whatever direction that white stuff, which is basically my personal direction, is facing a little bit out in a cone in front of me. This will block enemy projectiles, this will block enemy attacks. It basically gives you 3 seconds of not caring about any mechanics, alright? On top of this, it also is blocking all the attacks and anything that tries to hit your teammates that are standing behind your little blocking shield. So any teammate standing right over here would also get blocked from anything trying to come at it from that direction. Now, it's directional, so obviously if I'm facing this direction and someone hits me from behind, this will not block the attack. So just keep that in mind. It matters which direction you're facing. Next, let's talk about our F2, Wings of Resolve. Very, very big thing here. This removes a condition. So this is a Condi Cleanse when you activate it. It is also possibly one of the most broken and helpful tools when doing jumping puzzles. Alright? You activate it and it leaps you across. I love this ability so much when doing jumping puzzles. Alright? So, This ability is a Condi Cleanse. It also heals, and it also gets you to, gap close, or you can run away from a fight using it, however you need to use it. All right, it's really, really helpful, especially when you're immobilized. That's personally my favorite time to use it, especially in PvP settings. But that is how your F2 works. Let's talk about your F1 now. As a Guardian, you're still going to have your passive F1. You're still going to have your passive every couple of hits does a burn tick. But now you get to be awesome and you get to throw a spear at your enemies. Remember, through our trait lines here, we do increase damage when we are tethered with our spear to somebody. Okay, 15% is a lot of damage. So whenever I activate my F1 onto an enemy, I have now speared him. He has this little debuff right here called Justice. All right. While he has it and while he is speared, I do increase damage to the target. All right. Now, a cool thing about this is you can also reactivate the ability. So I throw it once. I now have the ability to use Hunter's Verdict, which pulls all enemies tethered by the spear. It breaks the link so they no longer have the DPS increase, but it will do a pull into me, and it's a 1200 range pull. Now, there's a big thing that I want to talk about with this. There are two different cooldowns. One is the cooldown to recast Spear of Justice. The other is the cooldown to recast Hunter's Verdict. Hunter's Verdict is a different cooldown timer than just recasting to apply the spear again, okay? So, whenever you cast Hunter's Verdict, you have a 40-second cooldown before you can recast it to re-pull people, alright? But you only have a 20-second cooldown between the cast to actually re-spear somebody. Alright, so two different cooldowns, two different timers. Don't be freaked out when you use it the first time, then use it again, and you're like, wait, why don't I have the ability to pull again? That kind of stuff. It's on two different cooldown timers. When we play Dragon Hunters, when we are fighting bosses in instanced content, fractals, strikes, raids, we are never, ever recasting our F1. We only are using it the one time so that we gain a DPS boost and a DPS increase when attacking this person, all right, or this thing or whatever you're attacking. All right, we have finally gone through all of our skills and abilities. We've gone through all of our traits. Let's actually talk about our DPS rotation now. Let's talk about what abilities we use and why we use it in certain ways, okay? So, in order to do that, let's start off with a fresh golem. Respawn my previous golem. Exit. There we go. When using Scepter, Focus, Greatsword as your three weapons, you will start your rotation in Greatsword. Alright? Your rotation is going to be Sword of Justice, Procession, F1, 4, 2. Alright? Or Symbol of Wrath, Whirling Wrath. The reason we do it in this order is A, we are applying vulnerability in Cripple. Then we are also doing damage with Sword of Justice, which does a good amount of damage, and it also has a bit of a cast time, right? So look, I activated it, and it took a little bit before it actually started spinning, right? So it has a cast time to it. Procession is the exact same way. It has a little bit of a time where you need to drop it before it starts spinning in a circle to do a lot of damage. Then we're pressing our two big DPS boost abilities. When we use our F1, which gives us that flat 15, plus it does burning, plus it does cripple, and we use Symbol of Wrath. Symbol of Wrath gives us a target under symbol, which is increased DPS, on top of the fact that it gives us retaliation, which is a bunch of increased DPS and crit chance. The whole idea of the combo is we have a sword spinning, a procession going, and a whirling wrath spinning around doing a bunch of damage, while we have all of these big DPS boosting abilities going on at the same exact time. So, the big burst combo, you come up to the medium kitty golem, sword, procession, F1, and then spin around in a big circle. That is your big damaging abilities. That combo, in and of itself, right there, will literally kill any veteran that you come across in the open world. I promise you. Respawn previous golem incarnation. Let's do it again. You guys can see the DPS meter when I am, there we go. So that in and of itself, I hit around 45k per second. All right. just doing literally 5 abilities. If you can do 5 abilities, you can burst very well. Which is crazy. It's crazy to think about. Like, it's so easy. It's so easy as a Dragon Hunter to just do a bunch of damage, right? All you got to do is sword, procession, F1, 4-2. All right? Now let's talk about your follow-through on the rotation. All right? Respond my previous Golem incarnation, exit. There we go. So, in my opinion, for most instanced content, a full sort of rotation is going to involve what I just described to you. Sword, procession, F1, Greatsword 4, Greatsword 2, weapon swap, Scepter 2, you're going to use Ray, you're going to use Shield of Wrath, then you're going to use Sword of Justice, Dragon's Maw, Sword of Justice again, Symbol of Punishment as soon as you can, right? You're basically just spamming all your abilities on Scepter. I mean, there's a bit of a rotation to it, but like at the end of the day, you're basically just mashing your face in the keyboard and pressing all your buttons, right? And you'll see. I'm going to come into Scepter 2 for activate my shield so it pops, Sword, Dragon's Maw, Sword. And there's something I want to say because I'm going to be linking you guys to Snow Crow's abilities and everything like that. What Snow Crows will have you do, what I don't recommend you do in actual fights, but if you would like to try and emulate a Snow Crow's DPS rotation, they will start in Scepter, pop Shield of Wrath, and then go into Greatsword and start the rotation. And I'll show you what that looks like. So, remove current golem, respond my previous golem, blah, blah, blah. So we're going to start in Scepter, and all we're going to do is press Shield of Wrath, weapon swap, and then we're going to do sword, procession, and we're going to get right into the rotation we just talked about. Go back in, use our abilities, boom, and we've got all our abilities set and going. Drop symbol again, and as soon as this comes back, we're going to weapon swap, leap, great sword, and then we're right back into our rotation that we just did earlier. All right, that right there is a solid amount of damage. All right, that right there, if you can do that rotation, you're going to be doing great. You're going to burst stupid high, and you're going to be able to compete with most DPS classes. All right. The thing with Dragon Hunter is we burst really high, and then we kind of fall off in terms of like a longer rotation. So don't worry about the fact that in prolonged fights you're not doing a ton of damage compared to most people. You're still going to do great damage. Your staple as a Dragon Hunter, though, is you have a lot of burst. You hit really hard, really fast, right? So, respawn the Golem. I'll try and go through what I just did there in terms of the Scepter rotation. So, we do Sword of Justice, we do Procession, we do F1, we do Greatsword 4, we do Greatsword 2, we weapon swap. Then we use Scepter 2, which is a symbol again. We're using Ray of Judgment, which does damage over time. Sword of Justice, Dragon's Maw, Sword of Justice, and then we're going back into Symbol of Punishment. I believe what you're supposed to do that you didn't see me do there was you're supposed to wait and recast Symbol of Punishment before weapon swapping back into Greatsword. So it's supposed to be symbol, use all your abilities, symbol, wait until symbol comes back off again, so you're going to use it 3 times, cast Symbol of Punishment, weapon swap, and then when you weapon swap, you're going to use Greatsword 3, immediately into Greatsword 5, immediately back into your big burst rotation, which is Sword, Procession, F1, 4-2. Alright? That is how you do a lot of damage. If you can get that consistency down, you are going to be golden. A big part of the rotation when it comes to Greatsword Scepter focus is your weapon swapping basically off cooldown. You are essentially weapon swapping every single chance that you have the ability to weapon swap. And you're throwing in as many abilities as possible while you're doing it. Alright? Finally, before we move forward, I just want to talk about our auto attacks. When you are using a Greatsword, your auto attacks have a 3 auto attack chain. Your third auto attack does way more damage than your first 2 auto attacks. So if I just run up here and I right click him, alright. There we go. 5, 5, 9, 6, 5, 9, 5, 6, 9. Basically, my third attack is doing way more damage than my first 2 attacks. Anytime you are doing a DPS rotation with your Greatsword and you are auto attacking, make sure you get that third auto attack off. It does a very large amount of damage. which, by the way, if you watch me, I'm just standing here auto-attacking, and I'm sticking around like 12k. But that was from the previous one that I never reset. Okay, now let's look at our Scepter auto-attacks. When you're auto-attacking with Scepter, your Scepter auto-attacks are pretty fast and actually do a decent amount of damage over time. Like, legitimately, it's actually a pretty solid amount of DPS. So it's okay when you're in Scepter to feel like you're just doing a bunch of auto-attacks. That's actually a good amount of damage for you. When we're in Scepter, we want to be using all our abilities and skills still off the cooldown, but you're going to be auto-attacking a lot while you're in Scepter. That's totally okay. That's totally normal, and you're going to be doing a lot of damage doing it that way. All right. Respawn my previous Golem incarnation. There we go. So, again, I'm going to show you the rotation for what I would consider kind of a full burst opener style thing for a fight, right? It's about like 15-ish seconds and 15 to 25 seconds of you fighting. This is what it should look like. You come up, you're going to start in... I'm not even gonna start in Scepter. I'm gonna show you what it's really gonna look like in most fights, not what Snow Crows is gonna be showing you. All right, you're gonna start with Sword of Justice, Procession, F1, Symbol, Whirling Wrath, straight into 2, 4, activate it. There we go. Go again. I'm gonna do that for a little bit of damage. We popped our Symbol again, and we're going to pop Symbol, and then we're going to Greatsword and Leap, and we're going right back into our big burst rotation. That right there, if you do that, and no, I am not perfect, I'm pressing my skills and abilities, and I think I'm doing my Sword of Justice a little out of order from what Snow Crows would recommend, but you can see, oh my gosh, stop auto-attacking. There we go. Respawn. Thank you. You can see that I still do a great amount of damage, all right? And I burst around 46k, and I'm ending up around, 27, 28k. Something like that. I don't have food on, I don't have utility on, nothing like that. I just have the boons on me. If I was to do the rotation now with food and utility, just to show you guys, we do our big burst, and then we rotate, we go over, and we do our symbols and stuff. This, boom. We do our symbol again, and we're going to do our symbol one more time before weapon swapping and doing our big burst rotation one more time. And we canceled our procession because we're bad at the video game. And look at that. We were already around like 29 to 30k. So that was doing it without food. That was doing it with food, just to show you it's a couple K difference. It's not much. All right. But it does greatly enhance your precision. Or sorry, it greatly enhances your power. It greatly enhances your ferocity. All right. So the big takeaways for how to play Dragonhunter with a sword, or sorry, with a greatsword and a scepter focus is we want to use our big hitting abilities when we have the most amount of damage boost. We will have the most amount of damage boost when the enemy is vulnerable, cripple, and burning. We will have the most amount of DPS boost when they are standing on a symbol, when we have Retaliation and Fury, and when we have our F1 attached to them. Basically what I'm saying is we will do a very large amount of damage when we have used a Sword of Justice and we have used our F1 and our Greatsword 4. That is when we want to be using our biggest hitting abilities, which for us are going to be Procession and Whirling Wrath. Those are the big two, and that is why we do the skills and abilities in the order that we do. Excuse me. When we're in Scepter, it's basically kind of button mashing, but we want to make sure that we have a symbol on the boss at all times. I want to talk very briefly about how Greatsword 5 and Greatsword 2 work. These two abilities are going to be the reason that we want to be standing in the boss's hitbox. So let's talk about Greatsword 2 real fast. Whirling Wrath, you spin in a circle like a Beyblade, and you look really sexy and awesome doing it, right? You look cool, and you notice that he's throwing out projectiles. You see these little blue things streaking out across? Those projectiles do damage, all right? If I was to cast Whirling Wrath right here, some projectiles are going to hit him, and some projectiles are going to run away and go in opposite directions, all right? Now, if I was to cast Whirling Wrath while in the boss's hitbox, you will not see a single projectile leave. There is not going to be a single projectile that comes out because the boss's hitbox absorbed every single projectile. So when we use Whirling Wrath, we want to be in the boss's hitbox so that every projectile gets absorbed by the boss. That, and we are going to use Binding Blades. Now, Binding Blades in and of itself is only going to attach one blade to the golem, right? So I cast it, there's one blade that's attached to him, it's doing that little bit of tick damage over time, right? But if I'm in a fight where there are multiple adds, so let's say, you know, Siren's Reef or Slothazor perhaps, let's respawn the golem, where there's a boss who has a hitbox and there are multiple adds all around. Let's say there's a Slubling here and here and here and here and here, and there's Slublings all around, right? If I am standing in the boss's hitbox and I cast Binding Blade, it will throw out a max of 5 blades. One of those blades will automatically target the boss, will automatically target the golem because I'm so close to the golem, I'm literally standing in the hitbox. 4 of those blades will be created because there's an ad standing outside in my 600 range radius. Those blades will all attach to the boss. So if there were a Slubling here, here, and here, and I'm standing in Slothazor's hitbox, and I activate Binding Blades once, I will attach 5 blades all to the boss's hitbox, all doing that tick damage. Which means that I am now, instead of doing 9,500 damage over 10 seconds, I am doing 9,500 times 5 over 10 seconds, which is around 4,500 45,000 damage. Okay? When you activate this ability and you're standing in the boss's hitbox, if there are other adds, it will create other chains, but all the chains will connect to the boss. So, this ability, along with Whirling Wrath, is why, as a Dragonhunter, we want to stand in the boss's hitbox. We want all the projectiles to absorb, and we want all the Binding Blades to hit the boss. Alright? Those are the 2 big reasons. And now, I think I have described to you basically all the tips and tricks of Dragonhunter with Scepter, Focus, and Greatsword. Next, let's talk about using a sword and Greatsword. Alright, it's going to be Sword Focus instead of Scepter Focus. So, we come in here, we pop our sword in right here. Our sword is also running the Superior Sigil of Force, so we're not changing any of that. We're not changing any of our other gear. Everything is still Berserker stats. And the only thing that we change in our trait line is we go to Radiance and we go to Right Hand Strength. We want to use Right Hand Strength, which is going to be augmenting our sword abilities. This gives us more precision, more power, and a reduced recharge on our sword abilities. So, now that we're using a new weapon, we are also going to be using a new rotation. Alright? Scepter Focus gives you the ability to have a ranged auto attack and have ranged abilities and skills. This is really helpful for open world content. Sword Focus gives you a little bit of a higher DPS cap and a little bit of a higher DPS burst when executed correctly. Sword Focus is really nice for instance content such as fractals or strikes or raids. I highly recommend Scepter Focus for learning the class and doing open world content. Alright, now let's talk about our new 3 abilities here. We have sword auto attacks, which again work the exact same way as all the other auto attacks for Greatsword. You have a sword chain, right? You do more damage on your 3rd auto attack here. Alright, if we zoom out, we're doing a bunch of 4 and 5k hits, followed by 3, 4k hits essentially. Our 3rd auto attack always does a lot of damage. Whenever you're using a sword, try and get your 3rd auto attack, and if you see, I'm constantly applying burn stacks because I'm a Guardian. Alright, so let's back up for a sec now, and let's look at Symbol of Blades, which, as you guessed, is a symbol. Your Symbol of Blades is a teleport ability. It will teleport you to your target. It has a max range of 600 units, so it's, if you're too far, you won't actually get to the boss. Let's see if I can get far enough away and still activate it. There we go. So, I didn't make it because I was too far away, but it does teleport you. Alright? And it drops a symbol on the ground. This symbol will work the exact same way as all the other symbols. It will apply Symbolic Avenger for you. So, You apply it, you get in range. As long as this white circle is under him, I'm gaining stacks of Symbolic Avenger. It also grants you Fury as long as you're standing in it. Remember, Fury is crit chance. Finally, we have Zealot's Defense. This kind of roots you in place and does a bunch of like throwing out missiles and weird auto attack looking things. All right. So if I was to face this direction, it blocks projectiles. All right. That little shield you see in front of me is blocking projectiles. It also shoots out a bunch of little like beams of light, if you will, and those beams of light are going to do actually a lot of damage, all right? And if I do it inside the boss's hitbox, you're going to notice that the boss just takes all of them, right? He's stacking a bunch of damage on the boss right there, and it goes very fast. When you're casting this ability, you cannot move. If you try to move, it will automatically reset it, right? So if I start it and move, boom, it's gone, and it's on cooldown, right? So when you cast it, you're standing still. Just be aware of that. Alrighty. When we use Sword instead of Scepter, it completely changes our burst rotation, okay? And I will pull this up on Snowcrows for you guys so that you guys can see. On Snowcrows, the website, and I'll link this in the description, you have the ability to learn Scepter rotation, which shows you what to do for Scepter, or Sword rotation, which shows you what to do for Sword. All right. When we use our Sword rotation, we are not starting with our greatsword. Okay. We're going to be using Sword of Justice, Procession, F1 into Ray of Judgment, Symbol of Blades. We're going to use another sword, Dragon's Maw, and then we're going to use Zealot's Defense. Alright, now I will be the first to admit that I am not very proficient with the sword rotation. I learned Scepter, and I know Scepter very well. That comes very fluid to me. Sword rotation is another thing in and of itself. I know it does more damage, so hopefully it doesn't take me too long to show you guys a proper rotation. But bear with me, this might take a sec. Alright, let's see if we can get a first try, though. So, the very best, like no one ever was.
I wanna be the very best, like no one ever was. To catch them is my real test, to train them is my cause. I will travel across the land, searching far and wide. Each Pokemon to understand the power that's inside.
Alright everybody, so that has been the sword variant of the Dragonhunter. Hopefully you guys know I'm not amazing with it. I'm still kind of learning the sword variant myself, so my rotations on it aren't anything special or aren't anything great. But they do a lot of damage. It is another option, and it is a better option DPS-wise during instanced content, just by a little bit. But only if you're comfortable and familiar with it, because it is a different rotation altogether, and it's just an option for you guys. So, the final thing I want to talk about before we get into the different trait line is our CC abilities. I told you I would just show you guys briefly what everything you have and what everything you have to offer is. Your sword abilities do absolutely no CC damage, or I shouldn't say absolutely no. This blinds, which is like the smallest amount, I think. But I'm going to pop a Scepter back in here to show you guys CC. So, as a Dragonhunter, you actually provide a ton of CC damage, and it's a lot of really good CC damage. So, your Bane Signet is by far your best CC. The moment you see a break bar, press Bane Signet. That's the only time to ever press Bane Signet. Okay, the second thing is your ultimate, your Dragon's Maw. You can weave this in to do a good amount of CC damage. Next, you have your Greatsword 5. When you recast, it does a pull ability. This pull ability does break bar damage. Next, never do this. I'm just telling you because it's an option, but please never do this. You can recast your F1, which will pull. This will also do CC damage. Use as a last resort. You're never going to really want to do this. As well, Your Scepter 3 does 5 seconds of Immobilize. Immobilize is a soft CC. This will not instantly chunk a CC bar, but it will, like, over time, chip away at the CC bar. So, as a Dragon Hunter, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different abilities that all do break bar damage if needed. I highly recommend that you use Bane Signet. My secondary would be using Greatsword 5. My third would be using Dragon's Maw. If I am on Scepter, then instead of using Greatsword 5, I will just use the Scepter 3. And that basically concludes how to use CC as a Dragon Hunter. Finally, I want to talk to you guys about the Virtues build. Now, the Virtues build is similar in playstyle. There's not really a difference in terms of the skills or abilities or rotations or anything like that. It's just that you're running a Virtues trait line. Now, I'm going to go in and show you what you would use for the Virtues trait line. Instead of Radiance, you change this to Virtues, and you would go 1, 1, 1. Now, what this does is it provides you with a lot of DPS. But the DPS is hinging on whether or not you have Aegis. When you have Aegis, this build does more damage than the other build with Radiance. When you do not have Aegis, as in you have gotten hit at least once by something in the fight, and you do not have Aegis anymore, your DPS is lower than that of someone with Radiance. So, it really comes down to this right here. Unscathed Contender. While you have Aegis, you do 20% increased damage. That is a lot of damage. That is a lot of damage. When you are in here fighting a DPS golem, that DPS golem is not fighting back. That is why, when doing this in a DPS golem setting, you will see that the Virtues Dragon Hunter has a higher DPS cap than the other builds. It is purely because we have 100% Aegis uptime in here. In actual fights, I never recommend this. There are maybe 1 to 2 to 3 fractal or raid fights where you could get away with running Virtues Dragon Hunter and do more damage, right? It is all contingent on you not getting hit to keep your passive Aegis uptime, or your heal brand constantly giving you Aegis, but those Aegis don't last very long, alright? So, deal increased damage when you have Aegis, gain retaliation, and your retaliation has increased duration, but remember, we took out the ability for us in Radiance to get a DPS boost from retaliation. So while we might have increased duration, we don't get the boons from it anymore because we're not running Radiance anymore. So don't let that fool you up. Deal increased damage after activating a Virtue. This is the part that changes your rotation just a smidge, really, and it basically just means that you're going to activate your F2 and activate your F3 for a DPS boost, not for a heal or immobilize or block of any kind. You're literally going to activate them just to increase your DPS. And then finally, you're going to gain increased damage for each boon on you. Again, when we're in the training arena, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I have 12% increased damage right now, which is super unrealistic in actual fights. Remember, we want to take these builds into the world and use them in fights. Now, in this training golem setting, this build does more damage than the other builds, right? Does more damage. You can check it out on Snowcrows. In actuality, you are really basically never using this build. You can use it in like 1 or 2 fights tops, and that's about it. So I wanted to mention it. I wanted to just let you guys know and make you aware that it's out there. It exists. It's a thing. It is rarely used compared to the other builds. All right. Even the speedrunners are going to be using Radiant style builds. All right. Which is, instead of using Virtues, we come back, we pop Radiance. All right. And we use our Radiant stuff here. So it's out there. It exists. You can try it out. I highly recommend that people that are new to the game, and I will make a video about this, but people that are new to the game start out using Zeal, Virtues, and Radiance, because you won't have Dragon Hunter. So if you're not going to have Dragonhunter, you might as well run Radiance and Virtues together for that huge amount of DPS if you can keep Aegis uptime, right? So it's a great starter. It's a great starter specialization until you get the Dragonhunter specialization, right? Once you get the Dragonhunter specialization, Dragonhunter is more consistent and more consistent DPS throughout a whole fight. So I hope this has been helpful. I hope this has been a fun time for you guys. If you have any questions, please ask me down below in the comments. I'm more than happy to help. I'm more than happy to share information. Again, I am much more proficient with Scepter focus than I am with Sword focus. So, you know, I'm sure you can look at my rotations and my abilities and what I was doing and what I was pressing, and you'd be like, oh my gosh, I could do so much better. Good. Do so much better than me, please. This is an introductory guide to just help people along and help people understand the class and understand the specs that you're running. So I hope you found this helpful. I hope this has been a fun guide for you guys, and I will see you guys in the next one. Have a good one.